Welcome to Wow or Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. The suffering of the depressed often go unseen and unheard. Chua Seng Lee is not a writer or a medical expert. At least he wasn't until this book. Now he can proudly use the title author. But his compilation of stories of sufferers of depression, their loved ones and caregivers' experience, I think deserves a conversation because the book really shines a light in the area where stigma and shame still prevails. We are talking about the book My Voice Overcoming, written in partnership with Chua Seng Lee, Elim Chu, Danny Yeo, and leading psychiatrists in Singapore. It is such a pleasure for me to welcome to the program Associate Professor Leslie Lim, who is Senior Consultant Psychiatrist from the Singapore General Hospital. He is also Adjunct Associate Professor of the Duke NUS Graduate Medical School. Welcome, Professor. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, such a pleasure to have you. And we will take your questions as well as the show progresses. So you're part of the conversation here. If you have any questions for Professor, you can call us at 669-11938. And Chua Seng Lee is the man behind My Voice Overcoming. Congratulations on the book, Seng Lee. Thank you very much for being here.
Glad to be here.
Tell me a little bit about the origin of the book. I understand grief lies at the origin of this book. Tell us about the late Colin Teo, who is mentioned in this book and who, the identity or the name Colin Teo is fictitious, but it refers to an actual person. Tell us about what spurred you to want to make this book a reality.
When Colin terminated her life back in 2010, I have a choice to grieve over the end of the relationship or to turn the event around for a greater good.
And this is a relationship you had in terms of a counseling relationship?
No, not exactly. I was actually mentoring him over a project that we're involved in the community. I've been doing community training for the last 20 over years. In fact, I just came from another institution, helping them in the community project. So I was doing this with this particular institution where Colin was one of the students helping out in this project. And over the weekend, I was coaching him on how to put a project together. And on Monday, I received the news that he terminated his life, and so I cried over his death, and my wife and I spoke about it, and we decided that we will turn the situation around. We choose to learn something about it, and so that we can share the information to more people. So that's the genesis of the book.
How prevalent is depression in Singapore, Professor?
Well, the latest Singapore mental health study shows that the lifetime prevalence of depression is about 5.8%. Close to 6% of Singaporeans have got depression at some point in their life.
And do we know anything about the causes of depression? I mean, I'm sure they're varied.
Genetic and environmental causes. Genetic causes is evidenced by the fact that depression runs in families. Mental illnesses run in families. If you have a person with depression, the chances of family member having it is higher than compared to general population. And also there are life events, stress factors, financial problems, relationship problems, marital problems, studies, problem with academic work that causes a person to become depressed. It triggers off a person who is genetically predisposed to suffering from depression to develop this illness in the face of life events.
And there are environmental factors as well, you mentioned?
Yes.
And what would some of them be?
Marital factors, divorce, breakup in relationships, financial, work-related problems, office politics, and so on and so forth.
Many, many stress points then.
Stress factors.
And
yes.
Depression, can we understand depression along a spectrum?
There are many types of depression. You have a mild type, dysthymia, which lasts for at least 2 years, mild form of depression. Not all the symptoms of depression are present, but it kinds of lingers on for many, many years. Then you've got major depression. You've got full-blown symptoms. Then you've got depression with psychotic features, where a person hears voices or has delusions. Then you have depression in the setting of bipolar illness. We call it bipolar depression. You've got highs, you've got lows, and a person swings from being high or hypomania into depression, bipolar depression. Then you've got postnatal depression. And a very mild form of depression is adjustment disorder with depressed mood.
Can you explain that to us?
Well, you have a life event, a serious life event, and then you are trying to come to terms with the life event, and you're not able to do it successfully. Then you develop depression. And then When once a depression starts, it has a life of its own. But if you're able to successfully overcome that setback, then you recover from your adjustment disorder.
So support in times of transition.
Support,
is so
counseling.
important.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned postnatal depression, which brings me to the question, are women likely to suffer from depression more than men? Is there a gendered aspect?
Well, I think it's due to hormonal factors, and as well as the fact that women have a lot of roles to play in life. They look after their families, their children, look after their husband, in-laws, and so on, care for people, and so on. Women, generally speaking, are better able to multitask, as it were. Men can't. Men can only do one thing at a time.
That's so cool.
Which is a blessing. I'd love to be able to call into a man's mind.
That's a disadvantage also. If you do so much, you hold so many burdens, and you're not able to really cope when really the situation becomes very untenable. So yes, postnatal depression, looking after the child, and then having to think about your various roles and so on. But there are a lot of hormonal changes when a lady gives birth. Sharp drop in hormonal levels that predispose a person to suffering from depression. In a milder form would be the period, the menstrual cycle. Every month, just before the onset of the menstruation, a person's mood is low, dysphoric, they get irritable, they can't sleep well, and so on.
And in the seven individuals that you chose to feature, Seng Lee, was there a weightage towards females, or are they evenly spread, do you think?
Well, they are more female, actually. I think I only have one particular guy that is being featured. The 6 other stories are all related to women.
Okay, let's pick one in particular, and it's a name that's quite well known. It's Jaslyn Tay, and for many people, they think fame would be a panacea to all of life's ills, and you think, how can fame possibly lead to depression?
Well, her story, which is one of the stories mentioned in this book, she faced depression when she despite of her stardom, she began to invest into stocks and shares, and she lost about $500,000, and that's where, and she had to fight with coping with the celebrity status, and this is the same time with the personal failure, and that drives her into depression. And you can read more about the story in my book.
Doesn't want to give too much away there. My Voice Overcoming is the book that we're talking about today. When we are talking about individuals who are facing adjustment, depression linked to adjustment, Doc, can medication be helpful there?
Yes and no. Actually, if a person has got friends, family support, counseling, they can actually overcome it without any need for medication. And if counseling doesn't help, some short-term medication may be able to help the person overcome that period of time.
6691198 if you'd like to be part of the discussion. If you're suffering from depression, perhaps you'd like to add your voice to the conversation. Tell us what you're going through. How did you decide which individuals to feature for this book in terms of shining a spotlight on depression and mental illness?
Well, the book, the genesis of the book is to collect a lot of stories, the voices of people, and I interviewed close to about 50 people. And I decided I began to see a trend and a certain pattern. But I decided that I want to show the various trigger to depression. So I tried not to have duplication of stories. So I've selected based on different triggers in life. So for example, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, people triggered by postnatal blue, bipolar, work stress, failure, as well as failure in relationship. So 2 particular stories about BGR failures.
That is so important, which brings me to my question where we talk about predisposition. Are young people less equipped to deal with depression, Professor?
Well, a young person doesn't have much experience in life, so of course I think they are more prone, and they are not so equipped to handle depression because they have not learned coping skills at that time. So it's like, for example, you try to prepare yourself for a common cold. It's not possible, isn't it? Common cold is so common, and yet we can never really inoculate ourselves well enough to cope with it, to deal with it, and to even overcome it and to prevent it, much less talking about depression. So if it hits a person for the very first time in their lives, I don't think they're really well equipped to deal with it. Maybe they've heard stories of other people being depressed, and it's very common for people to say, it can't happen to me, it can happen to somebody else. So that when it hits them, then they find that they can't really cope with it until they receive coaching, counseling, help from professionals. Maybe that helps them to deal with subsequent episodes.
Seng Lee, tell us about these two individuals and the differences in terms of the BGR or boy-girl relationships leading to the state of depression.
Both cases, they were all beautiful, in my opinion, personalities and looks. But when they when the relationship ended, both share similar experiences of how they were not able to manage their emotional pain. And so both of them entered, so similar stories, but different outcome. Both went into deep depression because they could not manage with the termination of the relationship. One managed to find herself back up when family members came to surround her, to support her. The other one was to be through another event that helps her to turn around. So different solution helps. I want to come back to can I add to the sharing about the youth
Absolutely, please.
Challenges?
So we're talking about whether the young are less equipped to deal with depression.
That's right. Because in the area of part of my agenda about this book is really to reach out to the young people. One of the reasons why I'm concerned is because from Tim Elmo, another famous writer, he shared light to us that this new generation, Gen Y, has a different set of problems compared to my generation, because of the advent of internet, as well as the BPA chemical in the plastic bottles, and the permissive parenting style. They discovered that young people these days are delayed in their emotional development by at least 5 years. Right, these are all backed up by their research back in the United States. When he shared that with me, I begin to see the same in Singapore youth as well. And so that's the reason why I feel like we really need to give our young people more handles to manage their emotional development.
But we often think emotional maturity comes with the terrain of life, that you have to experience pain, fall down, pick yourself up before you can increase your emotional maturity, so to speak. So if we could tie that in with the BGR experience. Professor, are there things that individuals who cope well with rejection, do they do things differently from individuals who don't seem to be able to cope with rejection? I mean, rejection is painful universally, right? What is the difference between people who seem to be able to cope with it versus others who crumble under it?
It may have something to do with their personality makeup. Some people are very self-assured, they have a high sense of self-confidence, or they have a good sense of self-esteem. Some people cope with adversities very badly. They have low sense of self-esteem. They've had probably adverse events happening during the early childhood days, a parenting problem, or maybe there was a lot of friction in the home, and it comes down with very negative self-esteem to start with, very insecure about life, about themselves. So these people cope very badly with adverse events, especially events that seem to make them feel as though being rejected by other people.
More in WOW on depression. Stay with me and my guest, Chua Seng Lee, and Associate Professor Leslie Lim. We'll be back.
Add to your wow factor with Michelle Martin in the WOW Club on 938 Live.
And now,
we're talking about My Voice Overcoming. Beautiful new book available. Actually, the book was published some 3 years ago. It's been reintroduced. There is an English edition of the book, and there is a Chinese edition of the book, a Mandarin edition, which was recently launched, right?
That's right.
Congratulations on that. The man behind it, Chua Seng Lee, is joining us in WOW. Also joining us this evening, Associate Professor Leslie Lim, who is Senior Consultant Psychiatrist from the Singapore General Hospital. Seng Lee, you wanted to share some thoughts on individuals who seem to be able to cope with setbacks?
Yes, I discovered that there are 3 habits that will help you to cope better. The way you think, the way you feel, and the way you relate. I discovered that people who can't handle setback well or pain in life well are people who don't have very good thinking habits. What
do we mean by that? Do we mean then pessimistic, negative thinkers tend to frame things in the negative?
Yes. People who tend to think negatively of issues, they will dwell on it, and they keep dwelling on it from a negative perspective and negative conclusion that they play out in their mind. So that drive them down the emotional curve, the emotional slope. Feeling habits is as well. Some tends to keep it to themselves, and when they keep it to themselves, it eats them up as well. So in some of the training that I do for the young people, I encourage them to learn to, and thanks to Dr. Leslie Lim advice as well, teaching them to deal with the way they think, the way they feel, so that when it comes to feeling, encourage them to share their feelings.
Is that a problem? Do people who are depressed, are people who are depressed sometimes numb to their own experience, disassociating because it's just less painful? Are they aware of their feelings to be able to share it? Is this the first barrier?
Well, if you are encouraged to share and in a safe environment, non-judgmental, non-critical environment, I think people will share. Young people, I think, will more likely open up to friends whom they can feel quite safe with.
669111938. We're going to put an individual on the line with us. If you have a question on depression or an experience or a comment, we welcome your voice here on WOW. Hi there.
Hi.
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 Yep. What's your name?
Thanks for the sharing. I think the book is much needed, and I just want to share a personal experience. And you talked about the Gen Y. I'm bordering at the Gen X, and at the age of 25, I had set my hopes of becoming a millionaire. And when I had fell from that goal radically, I thought of ending my life. And at that point of time, nothing else was important but just that goal of $1 million. And I think it's the myopic vision that clouds the mind. And it took me a while to get back on my feet. But I think having strong partnership with people, reliable people is key. So thanks so much for just a question. How do we shift the mindset of somebody who's already suffering from depression and can't get out of it?
Excellent question, and thank you so much for sharing.
I think there's a therapy that has been well researched. It's called cognitive therapy or cognitive behavior therapy, in which one seeks to identify one's negative thinking, negative assumptions and beliefs, and tries to get them to modify these beliefs in the light of evidence, looking at evidence for and against such beliefs, so that they are encouraged to look at their situations in a more rational, wider perspective. And so they learn that actually they are engaging in thinking errors, mistakes of thinking, which then impacts on their mood and then impacts on their behavior, what Seng Lee has shared just now.
I'm going to ask the caller to stay on the line with us and share a little bit more of your experience if you can. We'll come back with WOW in just a while.
Add to your WOW factor with Michelle Martin in the WOW Club on 938 Live.
You're in WOW, Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. It's ideas that matter to women of worth, and so we tackle tough questions. And today we're talking about depression here in Singapore. Such a pleasure to welcome Chua Seng Lee, the man behind My Voice Overcoming, Associate Professor Leslie Lim, who is Senior Consultant Psychiatrist at the Singapore General Hospital, and also Adjunct Associate Professor at Duke NUS Graduate School. And hers is a name that is associated with 77th Street, but really, she's a woman behind a movement. We welcome to the studio Elim Chu. How are you, Elim?
Very good. How are you?
Terrific. It's so good to have you join us. I remember it was 2013 Singapore
That's
Woman
right.
Award. You were one of our judges, and during the judging panel behind closed doors, I'll let you in on things, listeners, Elim spoke so passionately about the need to overcome mental stigma of mental illnesses, the stigma around mental illnesses. Tell me why you are so personally invested in this book, My Voice Overcoming.
Well, because I'm always on the ground. I always hear the voices of our young people. And, it's just going really on the ground. And when people start sharing with you and what they're facing and the challenges they're facing and how they need to overcome, depression and step by step, it really aches my heart. And then that's where I sat down for coffee with Seng Lee.
Coffee.
And so Seng Lee will tell you it's very dangerous to sit down and have coffee with me, because I will start to talk to you about something that's out there. And, it's a movement. So, I think it is very important because I see more and more young people needing the help and also the support of the people around them to get over depression or any challenges they are facing.
Seng Lee, what are the differences between the first and the third book? And we're talking today about the English edition of My Voice Overcoming. Are more people more open about coming forward to speak about depression? Elim, I think, mentioned during the break that in the first book you had the initials of people, and in this book you have personalities like Jaslyn Tay speaking openly about her struggle with depression.
Yes, ever since the book is out, I've many people come to me to offer me their stories as well, and I've spoken to professionals like lawyer, CEO of companies, and they just openly share with me that they have they have episode of depression in their life before, and they just share with me openly. Yeah.
Do you think, though, that there is still some way to go to overcoming the stigma associated with depression and mental illness, Professor?
I think it's a long way to go. People are still not really able to accept the fact that there's somebody with a mental problem working in their company. So I think if you tick yes in the box that asks whether you have mental problems, the high chances that you will not be even shortlisted for an interview. So very few people are willing to actually come forward and say they've got a mental problem. I think if you tick mental problem yes in the mental problem box, people think you're irrational, you're dangerous, you're unpredictable, you go berserk, that sort of thing. And you don't realize that depression is also a form of mental illness, and the spectrum of mental illnesses is actually very wide.
And people can and do overcome,
they can overcome
the issues and
with
manage
treatment.
it.
Yeah, can lead healthy, normal, productive lives. Look after children, have children, and do business and so on.
And we're very happy to have Christian joining us on the line, sharing his experiences with depression. In case you missed the first half of the program, Christian shared how at 25 he considered taking his life. And then I want to ask you, Christian, what was the moment of the epiphany for you? What turned things around?
I guess it started to look brighter when I realized I didn't have the guts to take my life. I think it takes a lot of courage to actually really do it. And so yeah, I stood at the seaside, thought about drowning, held my breath, try not to breathe, looked down from heights, didn't know how to jump, and I think that's the human body. And I realized that I'm frightened of death, and I realized that that was one of the main things I needed to overcome, and not so much aim for that $1 million or beat myself up for not being able to achieve that either.
Well, thank goodness for the wisdom of the body. See, fear and its original purpose is to prevent us from extinguishing ourselves. So thank goodness for that very rational fear of the body. But is managing depression an ongoing experience for you?
Yes, I think what you all have been sharing is very, very pertinent, and I'm very happy that more awareness is being made now. Again, the stigma is a big issue, because for me, I never dared tell anybody about the whole idea of actually wanting to commit suicide. I kept it as a secret. But it wasn't until recently when I met a few others who were recovering that we felt so liberated to be able to share openly, and actually more people came forward to help, and that eventually was the turning point.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for sharing. We really appreciate it. You take care of yourself and be kind to yourself as well, Christian? 669113938. If you'd like to share a comment or have a question for the panel, you can call through and be part of the conversation as well. Professor, tell us about suicide and depression. Are the depressed at greater risk of suicide?
Up to 15% of people who are depressed commit suicide. And males are more likely to commit suicide than females in a ratio of 1.4 is to 1.4 male is to 1 female. So although there's a female preponderance in the prevalence of depression, but the ratio is reversed where suicide is concerned. Suicide is more prevalent in the elderly, in those with middle-aged, males with medical problems. Heart disease, diabetes, strokes, Parkinson's disease, and those chronic illnesses that affect older people.
Tell us about the range of coping strategies that you came across in terms of your research. how individuals manage to cope?
Well, I heard a very interesting story recently. A lawyer shared with me that how she went into depression after helping somebody to recover from a sickness, and she herself, when the person recovered, she went into depression herself, and she found music helps her to get out of the depression cycle. And so this is just one very interesting way of how people recover. Now, the other story I have in my book is about the postnatal blue. The triggering event for this particular mother was the absence of the father. The father was overseas posting, and she was all alone managing the whole birth process. And she went into postnatal blue. And she considered ending her life as well. But what helps was when the husband came back, and I think once the trigger point is off, she was able to get back to life again. And so these are some of the some of the successful story I heard. Yeah.
Do you think it's about, to simplify things, turn to things that make you feel stronger or happier? It's as simple as that. People think it, must be complicated, cognitive behavior therapy. It's about changing the way I think, and that may seem overwhelming, but could it be as simple as turning to something that makes you feel better, incrementally?
I think everything adds up. I don't think that we can say one over the other.
But a simple way for a listener to perhaps pull themselves out of a dark place.
Okay, this way I'll come back to what I share about soul care.
Soul care.
Yes, we need to have right thinking habit, right feeling habit, and right relating habit.
Well, it reminds me of Thomas More and the book Care of the Soul as well, which talks about caring as opposed to curing. Professor, tell us a little bit about the search for the pill that will cure everything versus the mindset that is required to deal with depression.
There's no magic pill that you can take and you get well the next day, unfortunately. You've got to take it for at least 2 weeks to start to feel better. And then by 4 to 6 weeks, you should feel much better. And the first episode of depression, need to take it for at least 9 to 12 months.
So people should not beat themselves up for requiring medication.
Right.
Most people start to taper it off and think they've reached success, so they'll give it up.
Well,
and that's
a
dangerous,
recipe for
right?
disaster. They stop too soon. The minute they feel better, they want to stop, and that's an opportunity for them to become unwell again.
Elim, why are you so passionate about sending the message out, particularly to the young?
Well, I believe, the very key factor is about the people around us. And there's no one solution to this problem. And it's really creating voices out there. And that's why the book is called My Voice. And it's the third book of voices out there that people will share with one another. And through different voices that we hear, that we think we can listen to it, and then we think that it appeals to us to how to overcome depression. And, we learn from others. And then you take step by step to get over it, I think, which is very important. And, very important to have people around you. I think you must have friends that you can go to, because, when you are hit by depression, you usually hide away, and you think, like earlier Christian said, he dare not tell his friends, and no one knows. And half the time is because no one knows, and you are left alone, and that's where you think of all kinds of thoughts that will impact you, and that's why a lot of people lead to suicide. But if you start talking to friends, that's a part of releasing. The other part is you could write, and you could write it down. You could do something about writing and really pour out everything into writing something, and you can read it again, and then you take steps to overcome it. So it's very important that we come together, and I think this book is about a movement of voices of how do we overcome and how do we support each other. And we also have this movement with this book that's launched in the Chinese edition, where it says I overcome. We're getting every young person to pledge that they will overcome what they're going through, and then they put their name on it with a card and says I will overcome, as well as their helplines on the card for you to call, and for you to call for help.
We'll continue with Wow after this. Stay with us.
Add to your Wow Factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club.
This is Wow, Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. This is the show where we shine the spotlight on great ideas. We always have thought leaders, and today we're looking closer at depression here in Singapore. 669-11938 if you'd like to join the conversation. Hi, Karen.
Yeah, hi.
You have a question?
Michelle, yeah, I have. Can I go ahead for the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. It has been said that people who are depressed, they are supposed to, or rather they are encouraged to talk to people, to express themselves and their thoughts and so on, so that they can feel better or whatever. But then the thing is, sometimes, or rather most of the times, they just couldn't find the right person to talk to. Is it right to say that these people actually have to talk to the right people? Otherwise, whatever they share with their friends, if those friends are not really concerned about, their situations or conditions, it doesn't help at all. So I just wonder, how do these people actually can reach out, or rather to get the right people to listen to them?
Excellent point. Professor, would you like to take that question?
Yes. I think it's important to talk to the right people who are non-judgmental, who will not pass critical comments. The first thing the person needs to do is to listen to the voice of the person who is depressed without passing any judgment and without giving advice. So it's just to listen first, take it all in, and then guide the person to finding the right solution to their problem. Then maybe just offer some suggestion. I think the helping person should not just overload the depressed person with a lot of advice, and in the process make the person feel much worse than actually he was feeling at first.
So really just validation of the person's experience.
Validation of the feelings of the person.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. I want to turn to Elim now. We only have a couple of minutes left, seconds on the clock. Elim, I understand this is a third book, but you mentioned this is a movement. Can you give our listeners some insight into the fourth book in the series?
The first book is about, delinquent youth. I think it's called Voices, Never Heard, Never Spoken. That's in 2004. I hear all the youth sharing their voices where they said, no one hears me, and my mom's not listening to me, my teachers are not listening to me, and this is what I got into trouble and vices and all that. And then I said, why don't you all write it down and just give me your name, your initials, and your age and your gender. Because with that, I think they dare to pour out everything that's in your heart. And we got the first book going. And second book is about breaking free from their vices and how they overcome the issues of life. And the third book is really, the third book was about love. I wanted to do love because I find that when a lot of people got into some trouble and the youth got into trouble, then the parents would say, actually, son, I love you. And the son would say, Mom, Dad, I love you. But we find that that's missing in our culture. And I wanted to do love. But as I started to hear more and more voices, everyone is coming to me and said, look, I'm going through depression and I don't know what to do. And that's why the third book became Overcoming Depression.
And are you going to give us some insight into the fourth?
The fourth book, I'm seeing more and more young people who are coming up and creating movement, creating a cause because they believe in a purpose. They're all driven by a purpose. And I find young people driving themselves, and very driven to do something for others and for the community. They're building communities. So they're starting whether social enterprises project, they're starting projects, they're starting, a lot of things.
Purpose as a theme.
And,
fantastic.
It's going to be called Change Makers.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you for the scoop there. Elim Chu, thank you so much for being with us here. Chua Seng Lee, and of course, Associate Professor Leslie Lim. Thank you to you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
I'm Michelle Martin. Thanks for your company in WOW.
Add to your wow factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club.